face many challenges. One challenge is that there are very few readers. Very few readers means that people are addicted to mobile phones and other digital mediums. So we find people who are stuck to the screen. We had to pull them out of the screen and make them focus on books, which is a very difficult task. So this was there. No, this is not a new phenomenon because it started in 1930s and 40s when newspaper journalists and television journalists, they usurped the role of writers, and they started creating stories from live stories and other things and broadcast it on television sets. And at that time, the novelists were really challenged. They did not know what to do in the beginning because the realistic depiction of stories like what Thomas Hardy did won't work in an era where they are seeing live broadcast of John F. Kennedy getting killed. So they wondered how to bring back readers to fiction, and they succeeded by bringing in new kinds of narratives like the postmodern narratives. And they were able to bring back readers to the books. But now we find a kind of a generation which can create a novel in just maybe 1 hour's time, or even immediately by just submitting certain ideas. Or I want to read a novel like Thomas Hardy, and artificial intelligence will work, and the story will be downloaded. So we are facing such a great challenge. Then second challenge faced by others is the market, the kind of market that is there. The marketing people decides whether to publish a book or not. It's not that just the editor who decides whether a book is eligible for publishing, but it is marketing division that decides whether a book is eligible for writing. So this problem is there. So we find that market controls literature. The demand, what the reader wants to read. See, when Arundhati Roy published her God of Small Things, at that period, literature, literary texts, or literary fiction, narrative fiction, and other things were much welcomed by readers. But nowadays, after that, we immediately found that Chetan Bhagat came up with his novel, and so attracted a huge audience to such kind of narratives. And then we find all kinds of myth reworking and other things coming up, like Shriva trilogy and other things. So again, occupying a huge reading public. So two things are there. One positive thing is that these people are kind of popular fiction writers. They kind of attracted readers and made them read books. And second thing is that the quality of fiction and prose were slightly affected by such readers, because the simple narrative pattern adopted by these novelists, it's a kind of a reworking or a kind of parody of myths, stories from myths which are popular. Characters who are popular will be taken and put in kind of situation, so all these things, I will come to myth reworking later on. So all these things kind of made reading a little bit more less tedious than reading other writers like Arundhati Roy or Amit Chaudhary. So now what happens is that when how will this affect the writing quality is that the new kind of writer or a new writer who is coming up with his first book will be forced to write according to the trends in the market. So the kind of correct expression won't fit in, and it is not the editor who decides whether a book is eligible to publish, but the marketing division that decides. So naturally, books that will cater to the public will only get published, and others will be sidelined. So many books that are really good, that I have read as manuscripts, did not get published because it lacked certain qualities that will attract readers. A very good book published in India will sell up to 300 copies only. Whereas a popular kind of reworking of myth and other things will instantly sell 10,000, 15,000 copies. So, and later on continue. So this is there. So publishers and writers, they find a big challenge in attracting readers to their books. So in this context, we find, but still, we find that good writers are still there, and they are not bothered about publishing, and they focus on merely writing. Sometimes their books will come out and win awards, and then people will focus on such kind of writers. In India, we have a problem. If we understand or we think of writers only if they get a major award like Booker Prize or even some minor awards. But if a winner gets or if a writer gets Aditya Academy Award, we are not attached to that writer. So Booker Prize carries some kind of a weight for Indians even now. So Aravind Adiga, when he won the Booker Prize, he was considered as a great writer. But there are other writers like Amit Chaudhary who have not won Booker Prize, but they are far, far better writers than all these writers who have won Booker Prize. So we find awards control, and awards in a way is a marketing. So we find market controls literature nowadays. So that is one great challenge that we are facing. So when if Arundhati Roy submitted her novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, as a first-time writer, she would have got immediately rejection letters. But she got it published because of the popularity that she had with the first novel. And if she had submitted that novel, The God of Small Things, at present moment, it would have got rejected. Plenty of rejection letters. Because everything has changed. Everything is now controlled by the market. Even films, we find films, some good films won't get audience. They'll be just shown in film festivals. Whereas the theater people, they will never take such movies to be shown. And they have to depend on OTT platforms and other things. So we find plenty of good movies are going unwatched. Similarly, plenty of good novels are going unpublished. And in the case of poetry, we find that many people are there who write poems, but very few readers are there. Even those who write poems won't read poems of others. So that is a condition of poetry at present. Then in the case of theater, we find the new kind of digital kind of devices are employed, and theater is coming back strongly, especially in European countries, not in India. In European countries, we find theaters because one reason why India is falling lacking in all these things is that we have uh, no proper theaters as such. So whereas in UK and other places, there are very good theaters which they use devices and techniques, sound effects, and other things to attract audience. So it's a great visual experience, much more better than cinema. So theater is slightly prospering these days. In the case of cinema, cinema is also part of literature. Cinema again is, as I said earlier, popular cinema is going good. But in the case of art movies and movies which focus on not just on the story and love affairs of the hero and heroine, they still struggle. But still, we find good movies are coming up. Technology has developed. Technology is being used by cinema to progress. So, in the case of in short fiction, also short stories, we find short stories are now getting popular because people can read short stories. Now we find plenty of apps are there. So this helps us to read. Kindle is there, for example. Kindle, coming of Kindle is good because Kindle allows lots of short stories and I mean even long fictions also get noticed by readers. So if you have a Kindle app, you will be able to read almost all the classics free of cost. Then another advantage of Kindle is that you can buy the books very fast. So there is no need for you to leave your house to get a book. So you can read Kindle, and Kindle is fast reading. So the digital medium is enabling readers to read it quite fast. So if you are buying a book and reading it, you will take maybe 3 hours, 4 hours to read a particular section of the book. But in the case of Kindle, it can be covered in 1 hour's time. So advantage of getting time is there. So you will be able to scroll out and read faster. So all those who use Kindle will be able to know that what I say is correct. And nowadays we find lots of devices, electronic devices helping readers like iPad and other things, which help PDF reader, EPUB readers help us to read fast. And the advantage of all these things is that the light factor is good. So people, if they have any problem with their eyes, they can zoom and read. Then the light can be adjusted. But whereas in the book, you can't do all these things. You can't zoom the book, letters on the book. You can't adjust it to light. You have to depend on natural light or the electric light. But in the case of Kindle and other things, light can be adjusted. So adjusted so that we can, the reading experience is better. But still, people like me prefer to hold a book in the hand and read, because the smell of the book, a new book, is really good and enlivening. So we prefer such things. And now we'll come to fiction, discussing fiction, contemporary fiction. So contemporary fiction, when we look at fiction, we find lots of things happening in the world. Many good books are not getting published, that I have to mention. What we are getting published, we are forced to read. But those books that are not published are far, far better than those published, because as I said, I get opportunities to read unpublished books. But I found that they are really brilliant, well written, but they are not published because they are not marketable. It's very unfortunate. Many good writers have put in 12 to 13 years to come up with a book and find it difficult to get published. And those published are not actually worth publishing, because most of them, they don't have a good plot. They don't have, what is common in Indian current fiction is that we find lots of narrative things focuses on narration, the words, the vocabulary, the kind of language, the kind of description and other things take up time, whereas the real story is not there, or the characters are just two-dimensional. In-depth analysis or the development of a personality, the character's personality is not traced properly. We find all of them flat characters, and we find things put in here and there to make the readers attracted. So this is how current Indian writing is being written. Only popular kind of things which can be marketed and published will get published. And the other books, even though if they get managed to get published, will not go beyond 300, 500 copies. It's a very pathetic situation. And if once you get published and your book sells only 500 copies, you will not get a publisher for the second book, because they will trace the marketing possibility of your book and find that it has only reached 500 copies. So these are some of the problems faced by Indian fiction writers, and also fiction writers from other parts of the world. Now, we know that different kind of novels existed earlier, and the most popular one was the romance. And in the case of romance novels, we find there'll be always a linear kind of narration, in which the hero will be there, heroine will naturally be there, and they will fall in love, and they will face certain obstacles, and they will overcome the obstacles. And in this romance novel, we will find lots of narrations and other things will be there, which shows the kind of passionate love both of these lovers have towards each other. But modern day novels like romance, they are written in a kind of a different manner, in which we find that The plot will not be linear kind of plot. So the format will not be actually like the format that existed earlier. So, but we will be always have a nostalgia for the old kind of narration, like the narrations that we, like Barbara Cartland's romance novels and other things. We'll always have a tendency to read it like that. But present day romance is entirely different. Moreover, the love affair that we find nowadays described is not just between a very young lover and a girl, but also it can be a homosexual love affair. It can be a love affair between an aged man and a very young girl, like what that already existed in many earlier fictions also, like Lolita. So we find the format and the kind of narration and everything has changed. So we find a technique, modern way technique of postponing, postponement of narration. That means a technique in which you will know that in the end of the novel is actually very, it is a short period, but the narration is flattened in such a manner that incidents after incidents will be narrated and the whole thing will be flattened without reaching the end immediately. But actually the ending is quite nearby. We will be able to guess in the very beginning itself. All novels are concluded in the very opening line itself or in the very opening chapter itself. Precluded. Novels are precluded. That was a term used earlier. So we find we will be able to, when you're watching a movie, you will be able to guess what is going to happen at the end. The hero will marry the heroine. That is for sure. So you know when you're sitting in the theater, you know that this is going to take place. But still you watch the movie. And like that in the novel also, we find that it will be going like that. Linear pattern will be followed. But we find that during while following this linear pattern, lots of other incidents will be brought in. So lots of other incidents will be brought in. That means stories from the father's side, the mother's side, childhood stories, all these will be brought in. And a web will be formed. And in that web, the story will be narrated. Focus will be on the language. Focus will be on other kind of multiple digressions. Then these are actually violation of fundamental rules of romance. Romance, according to Parker, are characterized by contradictory impulse of moving forward even while digressing, postponing, deferring, and dispersing. So focus should be on movement of the story plot. The movement of the plot should be there. But here we find progression is suspended temporarily so that the narrator and they will be able to focus on different other themes. So now we find that the narration or the structure is stripped of its main major content and all the other things are added to it. So in a way, and love is not merely a kind of passionate love nowadays. It is a kind of pain also. Pain, or many characters describe the passion, the pain that is within. And it is a pain, it's not no longer the world, is no longer a kind of a romantic world. Because of the kind of things determined by economy, ecology and other things. So environment is not friendly. And 2 years ago or from 2019, we have noticed that the pandemic has threatened. So threat is always there. Threat is always there. Earlier it was war that threatened lovers, but now disease, economic crisis, joblessness, financial difficulties, the unrest in the country. Now all these things affect romance. So we can't expect a Mills and Boon's story in the present era. We find At any moment, a person can lose his job. Then we find new kind of love being. It's not new kind of love. It existed earlier, but now we find that literature accommodates gay lesbian love. Earlier, it was not accepted, and it was said in a years ago in a court verdict, I think, that all lesbian themes and other stories should be closed. But later on, it was opened up, and one result was that it gave license for depicting pornography in popular fiction and other books. So we feel remember how D.H. Lawrence's novels were treated during his time, and now nowadays how it was quite naturally presented. D.H. Lawrence is one of the greatest writers, and even now, if we read it, we'll find that we will still feel attracted to the way he describes and narrates stories. So Lawrence, one good thing about Lawrence is that the way in which he uses language, the way in which he is able to create a situation, the narrative pattern and other things are very outstanding that even now we feel attracted to this writing. He's a great writer. Sons and Lovers, if you are not read it, but read it immediately because it's a great passionate story. It's love stories there, but a person see the kind of psychological effects that are there in these novels. Psychologically, we find the kind of trauma that Paul Miriam relationship experiences because of Paul's too much attachment with his mother and mother figure and other things. So such complications are lacking in present day romance novels. And so when we understand now that pornography or sexual feelings and other things that were prevented earlier has now entered fiction, and publishers also demand adding all these things in fiction so that book will sell. And another thing in book publishing is that we have now two kinds of publishing. One is the traditional method, the other one is digital. So you can, even audiobooks are possible now. Audiobooks. You can, while driving, you can listen to a story. But the three experiences are there. One is reading a novel from the book, in the book form, then reading the book novel in an app like Kindle. The third one is listening to audiobooks. So all three experiences are different. When you are reading a book, you will be more intimate with the reader. You will feel you're holding something that the reader has written or something like that. So that feel is there always. And in Kindle reading, you will find it quite comfortable and you will read fast. But in the audio, you will be able to focus on other things and at the same time listen to the story and develop your imagination. All three are good experiences, but some people still prefer books because books, as I said earlier, holds a kind of intimate relationship with the writer. Even now, we can't get a digital signature from the writer in a Kindle. We download a novel and take it to the author and say, please sign it for me. You can't get that done now at present. Maybe later on it will be possible. But whereas in a book, you will get a kind of an author writing it down. Like I will show. This is a book. So the author can write whatever he wants. Therefore, the person who is the reader. So that is there. And coming back to fiction, we find nowadays new kinds of things are coming up. Post-humanism is taking a very important role in fiction. It's an era of post-humanism. Post-humanism, as you are all aware, is when machines take over and when human mind is capable of many things, but human body is not capable of what the mind wants it to do. So what happens is that in order to do more things, we depend on all these artificial intelligence and robots and other things. So post-human fictions depicts the world that is the future, the possibility of a threat from the um, robots, computers, artificial intelligence, and other things. Nowadays, when we talk about that, I will shift slightly to English, the trends in English language learning also. So with the coming of hybrid modes and with the coming of the threat created by pandemic, we have shifted to what is called hybrid mode. And nowadays we find most of the degrees or most of the universities are going to follow a hybrid mode in future. This is a great challenge for teachers. And but it has got its own advantages. And my personal point of view is that technology adds more to the capability of human beings. So let us use it to the maximum and make this a better world. So now we find in teaching methods, one method that I adopt is what is called flipped learning method, which I find is very effective. That is, in flipped learning method, we find the class will be uploaded earlier, and the student can sit home and listen to the class and come to the real classroom prepared, so that we can have more discussion about the text that was already been taught online. So this is the flipped learning. So the video class, for example, I'm teaching a poem by, for example, Wasteland. I'm teaching Wasteland and I give a lecture on the Wasteland and upload it to the class so that they'll be able to listen to the video lecture whenever it is possible for them. And then they will come to the college and I'll be able to generate a discussion based on different views. So the advantage of this is that the student is already familiar with the poem and now they can contribute, add new ideas, engage in discussion. So the 1 hour in the classroom will be discussion, and discussion really helps. So this is kind of advantage or current trend in learning language and literature. And a student, for example, if he is absent today and is not listening to my class, will miss the whole thing. But in the flipped learning method, he can go back and listen whenever he wants. So this helps a lot. And language learning tools are also available online. Grammar learning methods are there online. So digital media is helping a lot in people learn language quickly. And one advantage is that the right kind of pronunciation, the right kind of the way in which a sentence is constructed. If you're typing something and if you have certain proofreading tools available on your Word document, immediately the Word document will start correcting the mistakes that you're making. And naturally, you will learn after 3 or 4 corrections. So language learning is also becoming much more easier nowadays with the coming of all these technologies. So that recent trends in teaching English has also changed. Now we focus on, I don't know whether that's happening in Tamil Nadu, but in Kerala we find that we hardly teach literature nowadays. We are teaching disaster management, and we are teaching other things in English classroom lessons. Economics, for example. Amartya Sen's essay, we are teaching Amartya Sen's essay. We are teaching how to manage personal issues when personal disaster occurs in your life. All these things we are teaching, but it was a cleverly planned text that we use in the university for disaster management and other things. That means, okay, that's good. So you also teach disaster management. That I think it is compulsory from the UGC's perspective. I think. And anyway, so what we did was that we picture all these disasters and narrate or add stories and poems to the content, so that students will learn some poetry and literature also while learning disaster management. So this was adopted. This was the technique was adopted by us, and I think it is very effective. Students learn all the technical terms related to disaster management. At the same time, they also read some literature from books. So this helps. And coming back to fiction, yeah, we'll answer the questions later. I think that will be better. I think anyway, we'll have a discussion about flip learning and other things later on. So coming back to fiction, so when I'm talking from a writer's perspective, so you will be able to understand better. See, for example, I've got a novel by my friend, a man from Motihari, written by Abdullah Khan, who is the same author of Patna Blues. So look at the opening sentence. I was born in a haunted bungalow, and the midwife was a ghost. I was born in a haunted bungalow, and the midwife was a ghost. A novel, Man from Motihari. What is there in this opening sentence? Yeah, when you heard this, that it's very curious, something quite curious. I was born in a haunted bungalow, and the midwife was a ghost. So you feel kind of curious to know what this particular writer is going to say in this story. What this particular writer is going to say in this story. It attracts. So again, I am coming to Flights by Olga Tokarczuk, the winner of the Man Booker International Prize. I am a few years old. I am sitting on the window sill, surrounded by students' toys and toppled over block towers and dolls with bulging eyes. It's dark in the house, and the air in the room slowly cools, dims. There is no one else here. They are left, they are gone. Though you can still hear their voices dying down, that shuffling, the echoes of their footsteps, some distant laughter. Out the window, the courtyard is empty. Darkness spreads softly from the sky, sitting on everything like black tea. Again, so we have read two openings. Two openings generate curiosity. So curiosity to read, to understand what is going to happen. So this is what's called, this technique is called hooking the reader in. So once you have pulled the reader into the novel, the reader will continue to stay in the novel. So that is very important narrative technique that people want to have. People promote this kind of writing. Because if we write it like that, then the reader will remain in the text. So I don't know whether any of you have felt that after reading a few chapters, you have to suddenly go out of your house. But while you are engaged in maybe shopping or doing something else, you always crave or want to come back to your house and get into the kind of books that you are reading. So get back to the book. So that an opening sentence in a novel is very interesting. And I think I saw the opening sentence of The Tale of Two Cities. It was best of times. It was worst of times. Very attractive opening sentences. So opening chapter plays a very important role in novel writing. And how the novel, the first chapter ends is also very important, because the opening chapter is the kind of, especially if you are a new writer or a new novelist, the opening chapter is something that creates that attracts. See, you are not only attracting the reader, but also the agent or the publisher, the editor. Everybody has to be attracted to that. So that is a kind of a challenge. You can't really open up and write whatever you want. You have to please people. So this is the kind of challenge that modern writers face. Even if, let me tell you one thing, frankly, there are great writers, even Indian famous writers. And we find that these writers, after writing the novel, you have to give the novel for editing, which is a very long process. It takes 3 months, 4 months, even 5 months editing. And the editing is a very serious job. So you know that great editors are, even Fitzgerald novel was edited. Fitzgerald, I forgot the editor's name, but Fitzgerald had some conflict with the editor also. Ezra Pound edited The Wasteland. So editing is a very important job. And the editor changes certain sentence structure, certain things, and then the lines. There are 3 or 4 processes in editing. One is the copy editing, in which word by word editing will be the punctuations, comma, all these things will be added. Second level of editing is structural editing, in which whether the novel is structurally perfect or whether something is whether something is perfect, whether the narration of the progression is there, story progression is there, or the character progression is there. Earlier, we find when Thomas Hardy is writing a novel, he can take lots of time to describe nature. He can take Gabriel Oak and carrying his flute up to the mountain and play the flute thinking of Bathsheba. But nowadays, we can't do that. Because the editor will ask, how much of this is going to contribute to the novel? Or how is this connecting to a kind of the story? You can't take the hero and heroine and or sometimes the hero wants to go out with his friends to a particular location or beach or something and they celebrate. So the narrator wants to describe that. No, that will be edited by the editor because that's not contributing or adding to the story. So this adding to the story is something important. In a way, we find that when ultimately, see, I said I see a particular a novel like this will be around maybe 80,000. I read this novel as a manuscript and I read this as a book. Both are different. Okay, so the editor's work is very serious. Editor will cut short many things that we want. It is called killing the darlings. The technical term is killing the darlings. The writer is very particular that this scene should be there in the novel, but the editor will say no. And if the writer is not a very popular one like Arundhati Roy refused to edit the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, saying that it doesn't require any editing. And we all wish that whether a bit of editing was done because it is a kind of a rough diamond which needs a bit of polishing. If you have read the novel, you will understand. So editing process takes a lot of time and editor always keeps language, content, everything sharp and precise. So what happens at the end is that we find that the novel is a bit artificial ultimately. It's not natural. The roughness is missing. Or the the freedom the writer enjoys while creating certain things is lacking. So, in a way, this affects the fiction. In a way, it destroys the beauty of the novel, but it makes it cuts into perfect size, shape, and other things. It's okay, everything is okay. But then it makes reading an artificial process. It is not a kind of natural process that we enjoyed earlier. So artificial kind of feel is there. And one curious thing that I have noticed as a reader is that I don't know whether it's because of some problem that I face, but I have discussed with some of the writers also, and they also said it's what you say is right. Because after 1 year, you forget the story. You forget what this novel is about. And it is not, I have read that novel as a manuscript and I have read the novel as a book and I have read it, reread it because the writer wants me to write something about it and or maybe to engage in a talk about the book, all these things. So I read it several times. But even after that, okay, so after that, even after that, we find the story is lacking or we don't get the, remember, we call the story. Whereas earlier writers, even if we read it now for the first time, because I have read many classics for the first time recently because of Kindle and other things. So we still remember the story even after 1 year, 2 year, like that. We still remember the words, the exact words we still remember. So I don't know why it happens. Maybe it is because the writers focus more on creating an atmosphere, creating other things, or engaging in verbal exercises rather than focusing on other important things. Maybe it's because of that. Anyway, we find fiction writing has, as per demand of the occasion or the period, it has changed a lot. And we feel that what I feel is that how long will these novels survive? How long will these novels survive the test of time? Will these novels stand the test of time? And if you ask me personally, I don't think it will, because most of this novel will end with the first print. There will be no second edition or second printing or going on. Even famous novels, they don't carry the depth that earlier fiction writers had, like R.K. Naran. Even now we enjoy R.K. Naran a lot. R.K. Naran is considered as the greatest writer. He is, even if you ask me who is the most outstanding writer in Indian writing in English, my personal opinion is R.K. Naran. Because we have to understand that when he was writing, he was considered as one among the three best novelists of that period, E.M. Forster and Graham Greene. And it's only because he was in India that he did not get a Nobel Prize. Otherwise, he would have got a Nobel Prize also. So the kind of way in which he narrates, the kind of language that he possesses, even from a South Indian writing the British English, the way the language is considered and used, the way the characters are developed, the feelings of the characters, how the situations, how all these things help to picture or give us a vision of what is being written is simply great. And Mulkraj Anand, again, the way in which he portrays characters, the kind of depth that each characters hold is lacking in the present novels. And novelists are more focused on language. So most of them are, one thing that I did, or I will tell you, is that all these creative writing courses, which I also did, destroys the real writer within us. So the real writer will want to say lots of things. I will share something from my own writing experience. My novel is at present will be given for editing after 3 or 4 years of work on it, and after lots of peer reviewing, I'll share the experience so that you will be able to understand how the writing process takes place, which I think will be interesting for some of you who are also writers. So when we get an idea, we start writing, and we'll develop the story. And my novel was related to a fisherman boy story, some kind of a murder mystery story, and all those things. But actually, I wanted to focus only on the fisherman youth's life and how he's struggling to come up in life. But then that won't sell. The market will not be interested in such a story. So I had to introduce a murder mystery in that, and it went well. So it was just slightly mentioned. The murder mystery was not the main theme, but the slight sub theme. Then what happened is that my peer reviewer, we have a peer reviewer, all the University of East Anglia alumni have a peer review. My peer review was from London. So he mentioned that. He said, no, you have to develop that mystery part bit more so that the novel will become more interesting. And I wrote around 30,000 words and submitted to him for peer reviewing. And I was about to begin my second phase of writing this second section of the novel when the peer reviewer gave me a call and he said that up to chapter 4, it's fine, it's working fine. But from 5 onwards, some things are missing. So all these things, we had a discussion. And so after the discussion, the whole plan changed. So peer reviewing is not a simple process, especially when it is peer reviewed by professionals. We write essays, we publish articles, we publish it in peer reviewed articles. But how many articles are properly peer reviewed? Pramod K. Nair once told that we are peerless. Jokingly said, we are peerless. He told me we are peerless. We don't accept reviews or criticism. That's quite true. If you write a story and somebody says it's good, then fine, you like it. But if somebody points out the errors in the novel, you will immediately think that that fellow is jealous of my narrative style or other things. But when we are dealing with real professionals, that like what I'm doing with the University of East Anglia, professional editors and others, alumni, friends and colleagues who were with me in the workshop and other things, we find that they are really professionals. They will just give the feedback. It's just like getting a slap on the face. But you don't feel that slap. You feel that I'll tell you from my experience, all the peer review comments that I got really helped me shape the novel and give it a good kind of 80,000 words. Now it's will be given to the editor, and the editor will edit and give structural remarks whether this is working from the whole novel is balanced or something like that. So this happens. It will go up to October. So the novel that you hold in your hand and read and keep it aside, always remember, it took years to write it. Sacrifices. Lots of things happen around the world and the writer sits in front of his laptop and writes. Then there is the editing process, the kind of the character will take over the narration, and you are quite surprised that the story went that in that direction. You actually intention in the beginning of the writing process was different, but ultimately when it ended, it was completely took a new path. So all these surprises are there. Everything will be there. You will always have that story in your mind haunting you, affecting you, many things. Your job, many writers are bankers, and you can understand how hectic the work is. Even this Abdullah Khan is a banker. He's a vice president of Axis Bank. He has written 2 novels. He had around 200 rejections in the first novel. So after even all the rejections will, of course, rejections means agents will reject, publishers will reject, but all these rejections will affect the writer mentally, the trauma that the writer has to undergo. But finally, getting it published and translated into 22 languages is something rewarding. Okay. Anyway, so we find that in the narrative process, there will be a character development is very important. Character development, how the character is character progression. So you can't open the novel with a character in a particular state of mind and level and conclude a novel with a character in that particular state of mind and level. But there should be progression. To make progression possible, experiences should be there. The different kind of experiences the writer or the author is going to undergo. I mean, not the author, the character is going to undergo. So the character undergoes certain experiences, and these experiences shape the character. It will give him mental strength, or it will weaken him. Ultimately, at the end of the novel, the character maybe have progressed to a better person, or may have gone down. So that always, see with Dr. Faustus, for example, Dr. Faustus, in the beginning, the Dr. Faustus is very curious to learn knowledge and he's ready to sacrifice his life. I mean, not a soul for getting more knowledge, information, and things. Ultimately, what happens is that we find towards the end, redemption is there. He, yeah, ultimately, if he gets frightened or he thinks of God, earlier he went away from God. So that change should always be there in the character. Sidney Carter. If you ask me who my favorite character is, I will always say it's Sidney Carter. The kind of sacrifice that Sidney Carter. You remember when the novel opens, he's a kind of a person who is not that kind of very interesting kind of person. But towards the end, we find that I forgot the central character's name, Darnay. I think it's Darnay. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we love Sidney Carter more than the central character, hero. And the kind of sacrifice is something very, it's always there in my mind. I read it when I was maybe 14, 15 years old, but still that story is there in my mind. And I, even if anybody asks me, as I said earlier, who is your favorite character, I will say Sidney Carter. So such characters should be there. To picture such characters, the writer takes a lot of stress and strain and narrates various incidents that happens in the character's life to ultimately come up with such a character. So, and this character will remain within our heart. That's why I said, in the present day novels, we don't find such characters. For literature to come up, there should be certain experiences. I don't know how many of you have read Peter Hanke, a Nobel Prize winner, Austrian writer, very notorious figure for many, but as a writer, he's a great person. So when I read a novel, I forgot the name of the novel, but the character still remains in my mind. He's walking away from his house. He's taking a long journey. A long journey in which various experiences is undergoing. So that kind of novels may not sell here or any place, but we find that such narrations are really great. It kind of creates the reader or make the reader experience it. And there was another short story by, I forgot the name of the writer, but Fever. The story was Fever, in which a central character is having a fever and he is walking in the afternoon. The way the novel or the story is narrated is such a manner that I felt the heat. I felt that I was having fever. So if the writer can create such things, the writer can survive in the digital dominated world. Because in the digital dominated world, we find visual impacts or visual kind of things dominate. So when visual things dominate, what we understand is that the writer should also create a visual image. If the writer is not able to create a visual image, then the readers may not then continue to read. So when you are writing, the picture, what you are narrating should be there before the eyes of the reader. So in Olga's flights, we experienced loneliness in the very beginning. It's others have left and all those things. Sound plays a very important role in the fiction. Sound, smell, all these things will be added. Then reader participation. See, for example, two people are talking in a coffee shop or some place, drinking coffee and talking. If the conversation goes on like that, it will be monotonous. And postmodernists use this technique of monotony. Like what something happened, Joseph Heller narrates echolalia dialogues so that the reader will be rightly communicated the kind of atmosphere that was there in after the Second World War, the postmodern era. But now, if we use such techniques, the book won't sell. Sorry. So, if we, as I was saying, how to make the reader also involved. So, when you are speaking, or you are talking to your friend in a cafe, and suddenly the waiter comes and the waiter spills the coffee on. Then a narration takes place between the the waiter and the supplier, or the waiter and the central character sitting there, and he's saying that my wife delivered yesterday, so I could not. I spent a sleepless night yesterday, so there was some issue with that baby and other things. So see what is happening here in this narration. The two characters are speaking. Suddenly, a third party, which has nothing to do with the story, comes in and narrates this pathetic situation. But these things will get linked together. These things will get linked together and make the reader suddenly listening to a monotonous conversation. He's able to suddenly is made aware of another incident that happened in a minor character's life. So the reader gets alerted and the reader gets involved in that. So reader involvement can be brought in by certain techniques, narrative techniques, like suddenly braking the car and twisting to the left and making the person sitting behind uh, drop this mobile phone and is struggling to get the mobile phone. Suddenly the reader will also get involved in that. So it will not be a monotonous kind of narration. So narrative patterns have evolved out to involve readers. So earlier we find when you are reading Thomas Hardy's novels or the novels of that period, we find that the reader and the writer, they have a bond. They have a bond. Say so the reader will be taking us along with him and narrating all the things. Okay, about Alec Turbowy, about Tess, how her life is, how tragic her life is, and all those things. Or when we are reading Nana, for example, Emily Sola's Nana, and how she is able to control the army chief, and how she is able to have all the men around her, and finally how she dies, and how worms eat her body. All these things means that the reader and the narrator, they are together in that whole incident. Then later on in the postmodern period, or even from the very modern period itself, we find the distancing of the reader takes place. The reader is distanced, suddenly pushed away by the writer. No, 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 you needn't come with me. You go and understand the novel by yourself, or you go and read it by yourself, and whatever meaning you get, you understand it by yourself. That attitude will evolve. And nowadays, we find again reader involvement is necessary for the book to sell. So we find the authors bringing back the readers, and the narrative pattern has changed, but it's highly challenging also. Highly challenging because the reader has to, in certain novels, there are 3 or 4 different kinds of novels. One is in which the reader will be really stressed to understand the meaning. And the other things in which the narration is simple, everything will be told, but at the same time, certain things will be covered up so that you have to really strain to get the meaning of that. So these different narrative patterns are recent techniques of writing fiction, which is evolved. And as I said, there are other novelists also who write like what they want to write and how they wish to write, but they won't get published. So this kind of narration may not attract readers, but it is a kind of novels that will last for a long period. Because Ulysses, imagine somebody, or if I don't know how many have read Ulysses. Very few will read Ulysses, but Ulysses is even now considered as the best in fiction. How many, like for example, when we look at Salman Rushdie's novel, Freedom at Midnight. Just jokingly said that I am reading Freedom at Midnight. Because nobody completes Freedom at Midnight. All are still reading Freedom at Midnight. So there are lots of novels that we are reading. We don't complete. Whereas suddenly you get Chetan Bhagat, you will finish it before coffee. And so I think you want me to conclude that. So I was sending messages saying that it's very informative. Anyway, I'll take just 5 minutes more and conclude. So when we are discussing about recent trends in fiction, we also have to discuss something about recent trends in theater. And I wind up with theater because nowadays what is happening in theater. I have gone to Malaysia and watched the British theater group coming and performing there, and it was very interesting kind of theater performance. Actually, it is not like kind of theaters that we find in like in in our traditional way. So we find that in your face theaters are now popular. In your face theater. In your face theater means in your face. That can be said, or it's pronounced as in your face. In your face theaters means the reader will see. For example, it is I can narrate it very simple like this. And the actor coming and getting hold of the reader and shouting it in your face. That is what's happening. Shouting it in your face, saying this is the reality. So the kind of things that will be shown there will be different. It will not be kind of a traditional kind of narration, or it is not a kind of thing that is going to really have a story in which like our TV serials and other things, but it will be a kind of sharing or the direct transfer of feelings to the audience. Like you transfer data from one phone to the other through Bluetooth. So just like that, you will be translating the feelings directly to the viewer. Music and other things may be used or may not be used, but sounds and other things, natural sounds and other things will be used so that the kind of communication will be very effective. The viewer will get a direct feel, and after when many people or many of who viewed Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor John's said that even after going home, the tom 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 sound was there. Similarly, many kind of things will always be there to you take away what you take away from a theater is there. And theater is more dominating than or more attractive than cinema. I'll tell you one example, and I'll conclude with that because I think many of you want to leave, so I'll just conclude with that. So, for example, if you watch Othello killing Desdemona on a cinema, it won't create a kind of, or the background music and everything will be there. Okay, anyway, fine. But if you're watching it live, performed in a theater, where the beautiful Desdemona is strangled by Othello, it is a kind of a different feel. Because it is not a kind, it's a scene in which Desdemona will be struggling to escape. And the audience participation is also there. Somebody from the crowd will be crying. Somebody will be sitting here and shouting, stop it, or something like that. All this will add to the effect. And ultimately, when you leave the theater, after seeing the live performance of Othello, it is something different, something great. And it cannot be expected from watching a film. So this is how theater has evolved out. And theater is nowadays uses new kind of technique, digital medias, sound, other things in a particular manner that you feel the kind of the drama or performance in a better way. So theater has really progressed. Even the fiction has to be very careful because if fiction is not carefully written, it will not survive after 23rd, I mean, this century. So fiction, this will be the end of fiction also. Cinema and other things will also end. Theater, people going to theater has come down. The visual effects and other things are no longer going to attract an interactive, digitally addicted person. So don't think that theater or cinema will always survive. Theater will survive, but cinema and other things may not survive. Poetry will survive, but fiction won't. So that's how I would like to conclude my session. Thank you for listening. Lots of questions are coming up. I think it will be good if one by one you ask one by one, and if I know, I will answer. Otherwise, somebody from the audience can also answer. Anyway, thank you for inviting me to the session. Now over to the chair.
The session is open for question and answer. Sir, participants can post their questions in chat box if there are any. So there's a question, one question, sir. Shall I read it for you, sir? Sir, yes, sir. 1 minute, sir. So you can unmute it, sir.
Yeah, I will answer. Okay,
Yes.
so that question is a very interesting question. Whether to experience first and then write. Okay, there is actually it's not required to experience things because we experience things through different ways. For example, my novel was about fishermen, and there is many people, many peer reviewers have commented about uh, the scene in which the group fishing takes place, the kind of language that they use and other things. Actually, I'm not. I've seen, of course, I've seen because I live in nearby a lake, and there are 7 islands near my place. It's a beautiful place. I have seen them fishing. I'm quite familiar with the dialect and other things. So indirectly, I have experienced what kind of language they are using and other things. But when I write, the writer's imagination dominates and works. So when the writer will feel that he is in the boat, and that's what many peer reviewers said, that we felt that we were also in the boat. We felt we were knitting the net with them and other things. So experience is in different ways. We can experience it in indirectly or indirectly also. By watching a film, we get many experiences. We get understand how such a person behaves or something like that. Then we can imagine also. Imagination is more important. Imagination, you have to imagine, you have to put yourself in a situation, and then you write. Sometimes this takes place simultaneously. You don't go with a plan. When you're narrating, you don't go with a plan. You go with all the experiences, all the stored materials. And I think it's very good to think of what T.S. Eliot said about tradition and individual talent. That means in tradition and individual talent, T.S. Eliot said that different kinds of experiences are stored in the mind of the poet. And he cites the example of I think, Nightingale, and how Keats, on seeing the nightingale or hearing the nightingale, he writes about things that has got nothing to do with the nightingale. Similarly, a writer's mind is a storehouse where he stores different experiences. Whatever he sees, he will store it. He will not be seeing it from the ordinary man's perspective, but a different perspective, and he'll store it up. And all the experiences, all the reading experience, all the viewing experience, all the visual experience that he had also adds to it, and then he'll be able to present it. So experiencing, of course, helps, but you can't have all kinds of experiences. For example, you can't experience an illness and write about that illness. So part of it is imagination. Part of it is it is more of imagination and putting yourself in the situation, but still being an impartial person, or what kind of the quality that Keats described as negative capability. So in that way, when you are writing, the writer and the man that suffers and the man that creates, both are different. I stick to Eliot's usage, but still, what WB8 said, can you separate the dancer from the dance? Similarly, you can't separate the novelist from the novel. So, in a way, it is not just the experience that is important, but imagination plays a very important role. Okay, next question. Yeah, you spoke about writing is an art form, and when learned, how to one loses one's originality. But how does one get started the right way? How does one avoid getting lost? Well, yeah, I tell you. See, as I said, when you will get the feel that you want to write a novel. I got that feel when I was in the school, when I was reading novels and other things. So I got the feeling that I have to narrate a story. But even now, that has not got published because of various factors. When you are trained to write, you lose some of your originality. That's true. It is just like shaping something. So when see, for example, the rock has a statue inside the rock. So you have to shape it out and bring it out. Similarly, the story is within, but you have to shape it and bring it out. If you do it naturally, it will be rough. But polishing, learning the narration and narrative ways, methods will help you to make it polished and look good. But you will lose the roughness and the rawness that is within you. That is true. So, which is good. Maybe it is. It depends. Sometimes a natural genius like Shakespeare, he needs no class about how to write. They read books written by previous authors and write it. So anyway, learning. See, for example, if you're writing an essay, and a research article or research thesis, when you want to say many things, but the guide will start objecting. No, you can't say like that, because you can't say like that. That's the reality. Because it is not a place for a personal opinion or to write whatever you want. There is a pattern to follow. So you have to follow that pattern. You can't simply comment on a writer's book and say that it is the most original thing that I have said, and why are you asking me to delete it? Because you have to get supportive documents. It should require all those things. So similarly, if you look at your first draft of your thesis and the final end product, you will understand how a novel works or a writer works. First, the writer will write it in a rough way, and always remember that the rough way has some good things inside that. But ultimately, it cannot be presented, it cannot be published. So the editor works on it and edits certain parts, cuts it, polishes, and brings it. So when I always wondered whether learning or creative writing helps. In my case, actually, it has helped. It has told me what to avoid, what to write, how to develop the plot, and all these things I have learned because I did that creative writing workshop in University of East Anglia. I'm with the very 20 to 21 talented writers. So it was a tough process through which they selected. And all the participants were really bright and helped me a lot. If you search the University of East Anglia website, you'll find the Calcutta Workshop 2013 there. You will be able to see some of the videos and will be able to see me reading my story there. So that helped a lot. That really helped because reading is very important. I mean, learning is important. Learning writing is important. But sometimes it destroys something inside you. You have to sacrifice certain things inside you. But the ultimate aim of a writer is to get published. So writers are willing to sacrifice many things. Yeah, future of theater and performing arts. I think theater will survive. Whatever happens, theater will survive. Not like film. But I'm not quite optimistic about film. We have to do something really good to make viewers go to the theaters. All these popular movies, RRR and other things are coming up. But after 3 or 4 RRRs, people will be looking for something else. And even fiction. I don't know whether fiction will survive, but short stories will survive. No, long fictions may not survive. Short stories may survive. Poetry will, of course, be always be there. Music will take over. Music has already taken over. So music will take over. Participatory fiction and participatory film, participatory games and other things are taking over now, in which you are getting more involved. So games are taking over. So maybe fiction-based games are there nowadays. So that in a way, fiction has to deviate to such things. That's what I am talking from my reading and experience. Don't believe what I am saying 100% because you should always look at other people's comments also. Any other question? See, if you have a question, you can post it now on chat because the old.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
What is the name of fiction? My name, I will type it here. It's from That Knows Nothing is from the Bible. Culture plays a very important role. We are too much addicted to culture. That's one problem. We are not able to accept new things. So that affects our view and other things. For example, a film Kerala something is coming up now, and there are objections about the film. So we have to be very indifferent. It's not whether it's Kerala culture or any other film. We have to be completely indifferent. Art is art, and life is life. So we have to think of it as an artistic work. Why are we thinking of films as realistic? We still think that what is shown in cinema is real. But look at for example, all of us are academicians and college teachers and other things. So do you think that the college that is shown in cinema has anything to do with the real college life? No. Court scenes in cinema are different from real court scenes. You can't go to a court and talk endlessly like our heroes in cinema. So what is depicted in cinema is cinema. It has got nothing to do with reality. So all these censorships and other things should be focused only on showing, nudity and other things. But as far as cinema is concerned, the story and other things should not be censored. And otherwise, it will not bring up good movies. So censorship should be a bit more controlled, and artists should be given more freedom.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now, I invite Dr. S. Shanti, Assistant Professor of English, PhD College of Arts and Science, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. A very pleasant evening to one and all present in this virtual arena. With an overwhelming heart of gratitude, I deem it a great pleasure in thanking our resource person, a highly erudite scholar, Professor Kishore Ram, for sharing his expertise on this topic, cartographies of the contemporary literatures with prismatic perspective. Sir, you traversed across the elements of cartography that would enable the readers get their bearings in the imaginative world of the text. Since contemporarily, the convergence of digital mapping and globalization has spurred a cartographic turn in literature. Thank you, sir, for unraveling this concept of literature in a prismatic perspective. Your lecture has left us with volumes of takeaways. It's not just verbally sufficient enough to say that it was a highly exponential and scholarly session. Indeed, it was an awe inspiring one, sir. And we are quite anxious to take a dive into your new book, Dead Know Nothing. I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our head of the department, Dr. P. Ilamaran, for his constant help and guidance that radiates a source of energy. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank my comrades for their immense support and enthusiastic teamwork. I place on the record to thank all the participants for their active participation in making the session a grand success. Thank you once again. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, before I conclude, I would like to answer one question about the title of the presentation. See, always remember, whether it is a novel title or story title or presentation title or thesis title or anything, the title should be very catchy. Okay, that's why I use such a catchy title. I think somebody asked that question. Okay, and I think I've see, it is very difficult to talk about contemporary literature in 1 hour's time. Okay, so I think I have done a bit of it. I couldn't map it completely, but still, I did some kind of mapping in that, and I think by sharing my experience, also I think I've made possible for you to understand from a different perspective, rather than merely being from the perspective of an academic line. So, whenever somebody has asked about literary review and journals, I think we will, of course, we'll have it later on. We maybe another topic because it takes lots of time. About, of course, writing articles for journals and other things are very important. So you can conduct another talk because it will take half an hour at least to talk about that. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and making it an insightful section, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Participants can kindly fill in the feedback form. So with this, we shall end our session. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.